a couple months ago, you put a post out there about performance mockups. We've had some dialogue back and forth, and I just wanted to, reach out to you and be like, hey, tell me a little bit more about that. I think a lot of us have experience with mockups, but what was the reason why you decided to post that at that time? Is there a story behind it? Let me know what you think about, what got you posting that day.
Yeah, it's a good question. Performance mock-up, something I feel very strongly about, something I'm a big proponent of. I've been practicing building enclosure commissioning for the past few years now, and
Yeah.
the performance mock-up is definitely one tool that I always encourage, every team to look into and to pursue. Most construction teams, they're used to doing aesthetic mock-ups, right? We want to pick the materials, make sure everything's looking good.
Yeah.
But, let's take a little bit more effort, maybe spend a little bit more money and turn that aesthetic mock-up not only into aesthetic, but a performance mock-up as well. And there's a lot of advantages to that, which, we can get into here if you want me to keep going.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think one of the things that I look at, and I like that you distinguish the difference, right? Because people might be like, I do mock-ups on every project, right? But they're not all performance mock-ups.
Yep.
Right. So I think that to distinguish that difference is important, right? So I think you mentioned in your post, like, let's build a performance mock-up so that we can take these materials, these systems for a test ride. And why not do that, right? How important can that be? You also talked about lessons learned, talk to me, if you can, about
Yeah.
some of those lessons learned by using something like a performance mockup.
Yeah, well, I mean, some of the reasons why it's so critical and so important, we talk about these primary control layers from your wall to your roof, or your wall to your window, wall to below grade. It does two things really. It gets all those trades that are involved with each of those materials and assemblies. It gets them talking, and we have the details now. Hopefully, that's been fleshed out through design, design review, through commissioning. And we have details we feel good about. Now let's work on the sequencing and coordination. So that's one big benefit, is just, doing that, going through that process before you go and do it on the building. So that's number one. And then, before you go and put the aesthetic, the brick and all the rain screen materials up, these control layers that we're asking them to provide air and water control in our buildings, let's test it. Let's make sure it's working. Let's put it through some air water durability tests, and let's just verify that this stuff's working. And if it's not, if we have to make a tweak, this is a great time to do it. It's way easier to do it now than it is to go and do it on the building. It saves you a lot of time and effort. So there is an upfront cost. There is, it takes effort. It takes effort by the whole team to pull this off. But the benefits really, down the road, pays big dividends. And every single project I'm involved with, every single mock-up, I learned something. The project team learned something. It's never in vain. So it's I made that post just because I do see such value in it, and such value in the industry for it. And I'd like to see it be more of a common practice on every single project.
Yeah. And I think that particular post and that mock-up showed a lot of different transition areas in a small space, right? So a lot can be achieved without building something that's, all encompassing or too large. I don't know if that we could even say that, right? Because to me, any way that we can look at that, even if it's a small area, it's going to give you some sort of valuable bit of information. Two of the things you mentioned was sequencing and coordination, right? We can't get that generally from a detail, right? So to understand how it's all going to come together, and that coordination of trades, I think, is so critical that you can achieve and learn from those mock-ups, right? So understanding each person's role and how does that impact the other layer of performance, so critical, right? When we look at something like a performance mock-up.
Yep, no doubt about it.
So in being able to incorporate as much as you possibly can. I know obviously there's a cost associated with it, but when you really think of the cost associated with rework, right? There, if you can avoid that, you're going to pay for that mock-up, right? You could probably build 12 mock-ups versus rework.
Yeah.
The other thing I think is interesting, right? Maintenance packages for these materials that we're talking about. There's no maintenance package, right? You can't go back and fix it, right? So I think you made that point as well. Let's take a look at what's going on in a mock-up before the facade's included, just so we can start to address those control layer potential issues or challenges, because we can't go back later and remove the facade easily.
Yep. That's where the enclosure, the enclosure is such a challenge. A lot of those deficiencies are hidden a lot of times. So that's why we definitely want to test it before those materials get installed, so that we have that visual access and are able to look at all of the pieces as they're coming together and how they're performing. So yeah, and then to your point about the complexity and all the different details and how much you incorporate, that's just kind of project specific. It's really just going
Yeah,
to depend on the complexity of the project. What are the details? Definitely, for the one I showed, that I shared, there was a brick shelf angle, that a detail that we want to include. So, just ahead of time as you're working through design, you're thinking through, okay, what are some of these more challenging or maybe
yeah,
more atypical details that would make sense to put it on there? And then, yeah, it just comes down to budget too, how, you can go to a lab mock-up. You could go to the facility in York and do a full scale
yeah,
3-story mock-up, or the one like here, you could just build it in the parking lot. So there's a lot of options. And then you could even do a first installation mock-up. It doesn't even need to
yeah,
be a whole separate deal. There's a lot of options, but just doing a mock-up, up front, yeah,
yeah.
it carries so much value and can save you so much headache down the road.
Yeah. So if anyone needs more information or wants to understand exactly how to get mock-ups included on your projects, or even just having a conversation with either Ish or myself, we'd be happy to do that in order to just once again bring that opportunity, getting it in your details and your specification, the importance of a mock-up and the performance mock-up specifically.
Yep, absolutely. Anytime anybody wants to nerd out on mock-ups, hit me up.
Ish, let me know, how did you get involved in the industry?
Oh,
What brought you to be in the role you're at today?
yeah, yeah. So I started out, I was educated civil engineer, structural design. That was my focus coming out of undergrad and grad school. So I started out in the industry just as a traditional structural design consultant. So I did a lot of steel connection design, concrete, masonry. Um, yeah, steel. And then, from there, I wasn't actively looking for anything, but I got hit up by a recruiter in this building science world from Intertech. And, I didn't know much about it. I was like, wall assemblies, isn't this something that's kind of figured out at this point? But, you know,
Oh, wow.
but, I liked what I was doing as a structural engineer, but, sitting behind a computer all day, every day just didn't work for me. So, I knew I wanted something different. So I was like, hopped in, just let's try this out, and the rest is history. I fell in love, just the tangible aspect, being part of project teams, coming up with solutions, the forensic part of it. A lot of the stuff we built, there's a lot of issues with existing building stock, and you know putting the pieces of the puzzle together and trying to figure that out. I just really loved it. So yeah, that's a little bit about the history and how I got involved with it.
That's great. So having your civil engineering and structural background absolutely probably helps you in your current role in that building science arena. Interesting how you said, isn't this stuff all figured out already? And whoa, it's not, right? Like there's
Yeah,
still a lot to learn. And I think every day I learn something new, right? In terms of a question that I'm asked or something, a new approach to do something or a new type of technology that exists. So I think it's always keeping us all on our toes. So
yeah.
what's your current role then? Who do you work for and what's your current role?
Yeah, I work for Sustainable Building Partners. I'm a manager of the building enclosure group. So we're just a group of building enclosure consultants, architects, engineers, focus in building enclosure commissioning, new construction, existing buildings, forensic investigations, litigation support. So anything building enclosure related, keeping the inside in, the outside out. We're
Yeah.
consultants in that world.
That's great. So lots of opportunities there. Obviously, when we think about new construction, there's lots of things to consider. And then when we look at our existing building stock, right, there's a lot there that we need to look at and be able to remedy, especially as we see what's happening with, our energy codes and different changes within the building code to start to look at buildings and how energy inefficient they are. And then we're starting to find those owners of those buildings if they're not building efficient buildings or if they're increasing in their energy use. So I think there's a lot that's going to be keeping us all busy in the
Yeah.
next couple of years for
Yeah, no
sure.
doubt about it. And like what we talked about earlier, how quickly everything's changing. Oh, don't we already have this all figured out? But the
Yeah,
way we build our buildings changed so quickly. We went from mass masonry walls to all these individual control layers, and the
yeah.
technology's constantly changing. So there's a lot to keep up with. And yeah, it's a ripe industry and very exciting stuff.
the changes in how we build, the innovation, the new technologies, and then the impact that the climate, right, is having, and how we're seeing fires and floods and things like that, right? So we're definitely looking at, how is that impacting our buildings? If there was one thing that you could say to the industry from like a resiliency perspective, I guess I can't say one thing, but if you had like a call to action, and I know I'm putting you on the spot, but what would that be? Like, there's so much, like you said, we're the way we build is changing, our existing building stock, weather, climate, all these things coming together.
Yeah, coordination, collaboration. Construction industries really siloed, but I see the most success on the projects I'm involved with when the teams are dialed in and on the same page with in terms of what the objectives are, what the requirements are, and what we're all here to do. So that's one thing I'd like to see kind of change in the industry. How can we, and I don't have an easy answer either, but how can we all work closely? We all have our different sets of experiences and goals and what we but how can we, you know just like the building enclosure, bringing all these bits and pieces together so it all works together. That's really,
Yeah,
buildings are complex.
yeah,
It takes a lot of effort and coordination to pull this off and to do it so our buildings are durable and don't have issues. It really does take a group of professionals to pull that off. So that's kind of where my focus has been thinking about a lot about that lately. And I think building enclosure commissioning is a big tool to help achieve that. It's a
yeah,
third party quality assurance process that involves, it brings everybody. Let's all talk about this. This isn't just
yeah.
architect's issue or the contractor's issue. This is all of ours, and that's where I think it's such a powerful tool and why I've kind of fell in love with it.
Yeah, commissioning, such an important tool. So coordination, collaboration, and commissioning, I guess, are the new C's, the new three C's.
I didn't even know that existed, but I like that. The three C's, yeah.
The three C's. So if obviously you've been in the industry for several years, you were in, you started off as a structural engineer, worked at different companies, worked with different individuals. What about, is there something that you'd want to share that some people might not know about you? A little fun fact, something interesting, something that, is important to you.
Caught me off guard here.
Yeah.
One of my big kind of hobbies is blockchain and cryptocurrency. And we
Oh,
were we were we were just talking about coordination, collaboration. I see that as a really critical piece of technology that's going to kind of aid in that development. So something kind of, not a lot of people are into that. So it's kind of one of my side interests, but I'm thinking through how to tie that into construction and actually giving a presentation at the BCXA Building Commissioning Association conference in October on blockchain and construction. So
oh,
one
wow. That's
one
very
one of my one
interesting.
of my kind of pet projects.
Nice. I like that. That's very interesting. So last question for you. We hear the word resilient thrown out there a lot lately. I even heard it in our Memorial Day parade a few months ago that the word of the day was resilient. How would you define resiliency?
The ability to resist nature. How's that sound?
I like that. I like that. I like that.
Yeah, yeah, to be durable, resilient, it needs to be able to, the materials assemblies, our buildings need to be able to withstand the forces that it's subjected to, whatever that might be. There's air, water, two big ones, but there's dozens of them. So to be resilient against what? Just to be able to resist and maintain durability.
Perfect. I like that. That's very good. And once again, put him on the spot and all those questions. And I think you did a great job. I really do
I'll
love the
probably be
whole
thinking about
idea.
that one later in my head, like, how
Yeah,
could
right.
I
You
how
might,
could I switch that up
I
a
should
little
have
bit?
said this.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I think you did a great job. And I love the whole idea of coordination and collaboration, right? We all have an area of expertise, right, in our own little silo or in the world we play in, right? So if you think
Yep.
about, like, I spent a lot of time in Division 7, right? So how do I coordinate and work with as many other people and share? And that's part of why I, appreciate the time with you today, just giving us all the opportunity to put this information out there, and see what we can do and be able to work together as much as possible so that we can achieve those resilient structures no matter how you define them.